And then
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's PD, Co-Teaching Merging Traditional and Virtual Models. Your presenters today are Crystalline Smith,
yes,
Jennifer Cornwell, and myself, Joanna Perez.
that's great.
There's a co-teaching using Zoom.
Before we start with the content, let's go over some norms to help support our learning today. Please note that today's session and all chat, including private chat messages, will be recorded. We ask that you please mute your microphones and turn off your video in order to help us provide you with the best connection possible. Also, please post your questions related to the presentation in the chat box. Keep the learning student-centered and come with an open mind ready to learn and participate. And finally, we will respect everyone's time by starting and ending on time. Now, our learning invitations for today are, what is co-teaching? Co-teaching models virtual implementation via synchronous and asynchronous teaching. Making co-teaching work and resources. Now, we would like to invite you to take a poll using Nearpod. So at this moment, if you can please open a new window and go to join.nearpod.com and enter the code RJBHP. Once you have accessed the poll, answer the questions by selecting all that applies to you. For example, are you a teacher at an elementary school or middle school or maybe even a high school? Also, what's your level of experience with
Oh,
coaching?
I'm sorry.
Novice, skilled,
Really
or
bug up his
expert?
ass on special ed
And
me
do you
attend
have
another
experience
class after class.
co-teaching online? This poll will give us a quick snapshot of who is joining us today. So if you can, please go ahead and participate by joining us again on join.nearpod.com with the code RJBHP. There is the code on the screen. Wow, and we can see that many of you have already responded to the poll. And we can see by the poll that the results show that we have a range of experience with co-teaching amongst all participants. A few more seconds for you to respond. Well, thank you very much for all of you that have entered your responses. Thank you so much. Now let's move on. Let's start off by talking about what co-teaching is. Co-teaching is a practice in which two teachers lead a classroom, creating an inclusive setting where expertise is shared. An inclusive setting where expertise is shared is a benefit for a diverse group of students. Whether a general educator and a special education teacher, general educator and ESL teacher, or one of many other possible combinations. Successful co-teaching requires extensive collaboration in co-planning, co-assessing, and co-instructing to involve and address the needs of all students based on formative assessment and flexible grouping with embedded supports. We also know that co-teaching is mandated by federal law to ensure that students with disabilities are provided with supports within the general education setting. We need to remember that the root of co-teaching is planning, instructing, assessing student involvement, academic success, and using assessment and data to drive instruction. When thinking about co-teaching, sometimes people have a misperception about what co-teaching is. Please take a moment to read this chart, which lists what co-teaching is and what it is not. You may be asking yourself, so what's the difference between push-in services and co-teaching? Well, there are many differences such as the ones listed here. With push-in support, a special education teacher is typically going into a general education setting and servicing students on their caseload. Now, with co-teaching, on the other hand, the special education teacher works collaboratively with the general education teacher to provide instruction to all students in the classroom. When providers are servicing by push-in, it's usually for a designated time per the student's IEP. However, with co-teaching, the special education teacher is in the class for a longer duration, usually the entire period. Another difference is, typically with the push-in model, the general education teacher is viewed as the lead. But with co-teaching, both teachers are viewed as equal in the classroom. So who exactly are the individuals that are typically involved in co-teaching? Well, usually we have the special education teacher and the general education teacher. The special education teacher is the specialist in learning strategies and an expert in making accommodations to the core curriculum and daily instruction. The general education teacher is our content expert with the knowledge of the curriculum, standards, the pacing plan, and the overall instructional objectives. When we have both experts in one classroom, we have the greatest possibility of understanding all of our students and of enhancing the lessons so that students can achieve. Okay, so now that we have reviewed and know what co-teaching is and who's involved, let's take a look at some of the benefits of collaboration between these two professionals. Not only does collaboration foster relationship building between adults and between peers, with collaboration, teachers work together to build upon one another's strengths. so that the overall instructional experience of students is improved. Another benefit is that content instruction is delivered by the content specialist. It also helps with the removal of label and stigmas for students with disabilities. Collaboration is also a way to help students build self-advocacy as they feel comfortable and gain confidence in seeking help. Let's also remember that this partnership also upholds the law. Now, let's go ahead and dive into the co-teaching models. These are the models that we will be reviewing today. One teach, one assist and observe, station teaching, parallel teaching, alternative teaching, and team teaching. Let's think of the co-teaching models as a fluid continuum. There are situations and lessons where one model will work better than another. This image is a great visual tool that helps us understand the responsibility and involvement when exploring co-teaching models. On one end, we have one teach, one assist and observe, and team teaching on the other end. Please note that this does not mean that one is better than another. Now, before we take a closer look into these models, let's review two key terms, which I'm sure that many of you have seen numerous of times since we have returned to school: synchronous and asynchronous. Please take a brief moment to read this slide to yourself. Okay, now we will move on to the next slide. Now let's talk about merging the face-to-face world with the virtual world. In the next series of slides, we will look at traditional co-teaching models, and we will also be listening to short audio clips on how we can take the traditional models and include our new reality of virtual teaching. The audio feature was embedded to model an accessibility tool which may benefit students, especially when they're accessing information during asynchronous instruction. Finally, we will also review the ways to incorporate synchronous and asynchronous lessons to effectively co-teach. The first model we are going to explore is one teach, one assist and observe. Here is what it would look like in a traditional model versus a virtual model. Essentially, in both settings, this model shows one teacher taking primary responsibility for direct instruction, while the other teacher assists and observes. Let's explore how one teach, one assist, and observe may look like during in-person instruction. During one teach, one assist, and observe, one teacher would provide instruction to the whole class, and the other teacher would circulate around the room to provide support to students as needed, and may also be observing for a specific purpose, such as to analyze how students approach a specific task, lesson, or project, or to take observational notes for a student's upcoming IEP meeting, even to gather data for functional behavior assessments, or data about student participation and interactions. It is important to remember that although one teacher is leading the class, both teachers are playing an important and active role in the lesson at any given time and should be switching roles often. The special education teacher should not always be the one assisting or only observing. If one teacher is always the lead, students may not view teachers as equal in the classroom. Although this model is the most frequently cited among co-teaching pairs, it is considered to be the least effective co-teaching model. Now we will listen to how one teach, one assist and observe can work in a virtual setting. Let's listen to the audio. Please bear with us as we are trying to make sure the audio is connected.
Often the default when there is limited planning time is the one teach, one assist model. Essentially, one of the teachers is providing live instruction while the other is providing live instructional processes, which could be thinking through graphic organizers, IEP pieces, language supports, or accommodations that align to the core content. In a synchronous learning option, teacher one could be teaching a whole lesson on perhaps the cause of the Civil War, while teacher two is modeling and assisting students in the virtual classroom. Again, monitoring the chat or answering individual questions or demonstrating a scaffold for support. Again, in this versus the assisting. In an asynchronous learning option with one teach, one assist, one teacher could be preparing a recorded video of the lesson, creating the lesson materials for the lesson, and then placing them into the learning platform. The second teacher then could jump into the platform like Schoology and provide opportunity for students to have authentic feedback that is also timely for either whole group or individual feedback. Again, just like in the one teacher, one observe, we are going to be alternating who is giving or preparing the asynchronous materials, not solely assisting.
So to recap, one teacher provides live instruction and the other supports the live instructional processes and observes students to gain an understanding of their academic and social functioning. So what would this look like via Zoom? On Zoom, lesson responsibility falls on one teacher, for example, teacher A, while engagement and accommodations fall under the responsibility of teacher B. While one teacher is leading the virtual co-taught classroom, their partner could be supporting in a variety of ways, such as writing color-coded notes on the virtual whiteboard, or gathering data on student participation and responses. They may also be restating the learning targets in the chat box, or typing chat stems, sentence starters, or direction steps. They may also be modeling annotation on documents so that students have an example. Now, we know that all models aren't perfect, and there are some pros and cons to each. For this reason, we recommend that you think of the models as a fluid continuum and incorporate a variety of models into your instruction. Please take a moment and read the pros and cons to this model and reflect upon when would this model be best for you to implement. And with this, I will now hand it over to Ms. Crystalline. She will continue as your presenter.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Crystalline to do a few more segments. Our next co-teaching model is station teaching. The image on the left is a representation of station teaching in a traditional classroom, and the image on the right represents this model in the virtual setting. The class is split into two teacher groups we'll be calling Teacher A and Teacher B. Sometimes you will have an independent group working asynchronously on a planned activity. One student group attends Teacher A's live session, while the other students attend Teacher B's live session. The groups then switch and attend the opposite teacher's instruction. On Zoom, the teachers can prearrange for 2 breakout rooms, and the teachers can simply switch between rooms at a designated time to provide instruction. The how. With station teaching, students are divided into different groups and they rotate between stations set up around the room. There could be 2 stations, one with Teacher A and one with Teacher B. There can be additional independent stations as well. Teachers can provide separate instruction at each station, and students get to learn from both teachers separately. For elementary, this could look like learning centers in the traditional classroom. In station teaching, it is important to remember that student groupings are not necessarily determined by student level. Here is a brief video that shows station teaching in action. Please play the video.
In my station, we're going to go ahead and address the question, how do we construct a line plot to record our data? We're so great at line plots already. Can we do it? Making our own.
And at this station, we're going to be looking at the driving question, what strategies help us to measure to the nearest 1/4 inch? So we're going to do a little bit of measuring today, a little bit of discussing how that works using great strategies at this.
Please don't forget to X out before we do our station rotation. That way, Ms. Freeling's group that moves here can go ahead and start over. Let's give ourselves 12 minutes for the first one.
Okay.
We'll have to get material.
Okay.
But after that, let's go 10.
Sweet.
You hear that?
Great.
All right.
Okay. There's the timer, so we'll finish up.
Are you in a really good spot?
Excellent. We are good to go. Station rotation, please. That was a good idea. I should have thought about that. Thank you so much. Jacob, hey.
By the end, you did. That's a 3. Well
Awesome.
done. Proud of you guys. Excellent. Let's put those pencils back in your desk and we'll collect those papers. Make sure your names are out.
Good job.
Station teaching may also mean that you get to be creative about how students are working collaboratively. When thinking about station teaching in a virtual environment, it is important to think about time allocations. Are you having students work through stations once a week or daily at just one station? Are you having students rotate every 15 minutes or 20 minutes, depending on the grade level? Remember to rotate students into the waiting room or a Zoom breakout room to work in small groups with teachers and paraprofessionals as they do pop-in visits. When planning for station teaching, there are a few things to think about. Number 1, are your goals in each of your stations dependent or independent from each other? Number 2, In a synchronous session of station teaching, you should bring all students back to a common space after the agreed upon time set by the co-teachers. Number 3, the use of a Google document or a Schoology post that students would visit over the course of the day to add their feedback, submit work, and respond to other students' work. The Zoom view. We will take a look at Zoom and station teaching. The class would start together as a whole group in the main teacher's Zoom link. Teacher A or B may teach the whole group for 15 or 20 minutes. Teachers explain that all students will be rotating into each station. Depending on how many groups are planned, some students may work in a small group with a teacher coming in and out to check for progress. Students can also work alone in a waiting room. The teacher places students in their breakout rooms. Here are some pros and cons to station teaching. Read a few bullet points from each column. If you have questions about station teaching, put them in our Zoom chat, please, and we will assist you. Our third co-teaching model is parallel teaching. The image on the left demonstrates parallel teaching in a traditional classroom, and the image on the right we would have modeled in the virtual setting. The how for parallel teaching. With parallel teaching, teachers split the class in half and they teach simultaneously. One half of the class works with teacher A, and the other half of the class works with teacher B. The same information or skill is being addressed in both groups, but teachers can vary how they instruct. For example, one group of students may receive manipulatives for instruction, but the other group does not. These differences in instructional delivery should be determined based on student groupings and needs. We're going to offer you another audio clip explaining more about parallel teaching. Please play audio.
With parallel teaching, you are dividing and conquering. So you're making mixed ability groups or groups that are very unique to themselves. And essentially, the co-teaching partners are covering the same material, but with smaller grouping configuration. So they have a lower student to teacher ratio. In synchronous learning options, a live session, the class can meet as a whole via Zoom so that the teachers can introduce the lesson or activity. They then can be divided in half into 2 breakout rooms, each with their own set of students for their smaller group instruction. So you need to be thinking about what this might look like as you're using Zoom. You will want to have pre-assigned breakout rooms for your students so that moving into that parallel teaching activity will be a quick and seamless transition. You will also want to pre-arrange what documents you will be sharing with your 2 groups of students, depending on what the activity calls for. This can easily be set up within your Schoology course for the class. In addition, you will want to discuss with your partner teacher ahead of time whether you will have the class come back together as a whole before the synchronous learning session is ended. Ideally, if the students are not brought back together as a whole to share work products, The teachers, at least, are debriefing to discuss what happened in the main virtual spaces, maybe sharing the products created, or to talk about what worked and what didn't work. From there, if asynchronous lessons are being partnered with the live session, that independent work may need to be modified based on student performance in the breakout groups. When an asynchronous lesson is paired with the synchronous, teachers will additionally need to plan ahead of time what additional activity may be assigned and how student learning will be assessed. In both forms of parallel teaching, whether live or asynchronous, the challenge is for the teachers to come back together to analyze and reflect on the learning and to address what was happening in the breakout groups and homework cohesion.
Here is the Zoom view of parallel teaching. The class starts together in the main teacher's Zoom link. The main teacher explains that the class will be split into 2 groups. The teacher places half of the students in one breakout room and the other half in another with the other teacher, with teacher B. Please look over the pros and cons surrounding parallel teaching. Some things to ask yourself are, what stands out to you? What instructional methods are you skilled at? Our 4th co-teaching model is alternative teaching. The image on the left represents a traditional classroom, and the image on the right represents this model in the virtual setting. The how for alternative teaching. This co-teaching model happens when teacher A assumes the instructional role for the whole group, while teacher B takes a smaller group who needs additional support or reteaching. The smaller group of students are those who may need more attention, whether they have learning disabilities or are gifted. It is important that no new information is given to either group at this time. This helps to ensure that no students are falling behind their peers based on their need for additional support or practice. Now let's listen to an audio clip about how alternative teaching can work in a virtual setting. Please play audio.
In a traditional classroom setting, alternative teaching is essentially one of the teachers working with a whole group and another teacher taking a smaller group to pre-teach, reteach, accelerate teach, or perhaps do some skill building. So you're really creating a smaller group and a larger group to provide some specific instruction. Now, what this may look like in a synchronous virtual classroom is that one teacher, the specialist or the grade level teacher, works with a small group of students on a specific activity while teacher 2 is instructing a whole group. With this model, it is important to reverse the roles of the teachers and to change the purpose of the small groups. In a synchronous setting, you will need 2 separate virtual spaces so that online learning can happen in real time but in different environments. This can be done in Zoom breakout rooms. Now, in asynchronous teaching, when we're not all together in real time, teacher 1 can create a module that the larger group can view over the course of the day or the week, and the teacher 2 may assign a separate alternative lesson to pre-teach, reteach, and accelerate teach. Also, when you're differentiating lessons, you can use the Zoom breakout room to assign a task that only goes to certain students to receive customized, differentiated, and accommodated assignments that they are able to work on. This allows for you to send students their own differentiated lessons as opposed to sharing both lessons.
Here is the Zoom view for alternative teaching. The class starts together in the main teacher's Zoom link. Students are divided into two groups. One is a large group and the other is a smaller group. Teacher A and B should switch off and who provides small and large group instruction. Please note the pros and cons of alternative teaching, plus the caution note. The last co-teaching model is team teaching. Take a look at the images. You see the traditional image on the left and the virtual image on the right. With the team teaching model, both teachers are providing instruction simultaneously to the whole group of students. This model requires a strong relationship between the co-teachers. Most co-teachers consider this approach the most complex, but also the most satisfying. In team teaching, teacher styles must work together so that each teacher feels comfortable with what is presented by their partner. Don't forget that the content being taught is the same. Let's listen to an audio clip on how we can make your team teaching a stronger, smarter way of partnering with other teachers synchronously and asynchronously. Please play audio.
In team teaching, ultimately what we are thinking about is a dual instructional leadership. In this case, teachers are alternating their roles and they switch between presenting, reviewing, and monitoring instruction. You are both equally present and available to the entire class during the lesson. In a synchronous lesson, you are both present and visible in the classroom, teaching the whole group on whatever your content concepts are. Teacher 1 may introduce the concepts and lessons, providing initial instruction, while teacher 2 might then go into some guided practice or can provide the examples, interjections, assessments, or models. Sometimes this is a hybrid of all the other models. It's not necessarily a baton passing, but rather that you are introducing skills and concepts with equal responsibility for the content. One teacher may go into some guided skills practice, and the other teacher may provide some scaffolding. Now in asynchronous learning isn't very different. Again, teacher 1 and 2 can provide recorded lessons that emulate or simulate what a live session might be. Another quick tip here is that you may just simply record your live session in your synchronous session and offer it as a resource or tool. And you can share the lesson in the virtual classroom. It can be very similar to a synchronous lesson option, which in the end saves you time in your
Here's the Zoom view for team teaching. The class starts together in the main teacher's Zoom link. Teacher A and Teacher B take turns presenting information to a whole group. The shared benefit includes having ownership of the lesson, receiving student feedback, and the asking and answering of student questions. Notice the pros and cons of team teaching. Read a few bullet points on the slide. How can you troubleshoot a con you might encounter? At this time, I will hand over the next section on how to choose a co-teaching model to JC. If there are any questions about any of the info I presented, please place them in the chat and we'll do our best to assist you. Thank you.
All right, so with all of these great co-teaching models to choose from, how do you know which one is the best choice? Well, the next portion of this presentation will cover how to choose a co-teaching model. There are important questions you have to ask yourself when choosing a co-teaching model. There are many things to consider. The first thing to keep in mind is that you always start with the lesson. Never choose a co-teaching model first and then try to fit a lesson into that model. Start with the lesson and find the best co-teaching model to use to convey that information. When looking at the lesson, ask yourself, what are the goals of the lesson? What co-teaching method would help all students achieve these goals? Should the information be taught whole group or in small group? Consider your students. What co-teaching model plays towards their strengths? Do not forget to look at student data and determine the needs of your students. What do students' IEPs say? What formal and informal data do you have regarding student needs? Which co-teaching model allows you to include accommodations for your students? It is also important to take into account your co-teaching partner. In what areas can you rely on your co-teacher? What are your strengths and weaknesses as a co-teaching team? Again, first plan the lesson, then choose the best co-teaching model. Certain co-teaching models work best when teaching the whole class, while others work better when teaching in small groups. When looking at your lesson, ask yourself, does this content need to be taught whole group or in small group? If your answer is whole group, team teaching or one teach, one assist, and or observe might work best. If your lesson is best delivered in a small group, you may want to consider station, alternative, or parallel teaching. Remember, go beyond your comfort zone. Try different models of co-teaching and make adjustments as you go. Sometimes we get comfortable co-teaching in one method, but remember, we should be looking at the lesson first, not which model we are the most comfortable with. It can feel uncomfortable if you are not used to having another teacher in the classroom. It may be hard to let go and share your classroom with students. Look at co-teaching as a gain. You are gaining another expert to meet the needs of all the students in the classroom. So far, we've discussed what co-teaching is and what it is not. We've covered the different co-teaching models and what they look like through the virtual lens, both synchronously and asynchronously. We also briefly looked at what things to consider when selecting a co-teaching model. But how do you actually make co-teaching work? Many questions start to come up when you sit down to consider how you're going to implement co-teaching. Take a moment to read some of the most common questions. LAUSD uses Schoology as our virtual classroom or platform. When co-teaching, you can make another teacher an administrator in your course or group. There are numerous trainings on MyPLN, videos on YouTube, and the Schoology website if you have questions regarding Schoology. LAUSD even offers office hours if you have more questions. Most of us are using Zoom to reach our students. Zoom has the advantage of easy to control breakout rooms, which is perfect for co-teaching. You can also make your co-teacher your co-host. You may also create multiple separate Google Meets to support students in inclusion when co-teaching classes. Here are 10 strategies for successful co-teaching in the virtual classroom. Take a minute and read them to yourself. There are a few things worth pointing out on this slide. It is important to set expectations. Just as we do with our students, we need to do this with each other so that everyone is clear on what is expected. Schedule and hold weekly planning meetings. Planning is the make it or break it of co-teaching. In addition, remember to plan for both synchronously and asynchronously learning together. When planning, identify which role each teacher will take on in the co-teaching model that you will be using. Just like we get restless at our desks and staring at the screen, so do our students. Make virtual lessons interactive. Utilize each other to monitor student engagement and interactions. Use breakout rooms for various options in presenting instruction. Do not forget to review and reflect student data together. Student data is what drives our planning and instruction. Offer office hours as a team. Students will see both adults as equal in their education. Remember, some of us are very comfortable in the virtual world, while many of us are still learning. So be flexible and understanding with your co-teacher. We are all lifelong learners. One of the difficulties that comes up with co-teaching quite a bit is the fact that we are often teaching in a multiple grade level classroom. This can be challenging. Remember, planning is everything. You need to consider your schedule, students, and the lesson. Here are a few questions you can ask yourself when planning for co-teaching. Take a minute and read them to yourself. Here are 2 examples on how you can co-teach with multiple grade levels. If your lesson is best taught using the station method, it may look like something on the left of the slide. Teacher A and B would both have a group. Groups can be made based on skill level or grade level. Students would rotate between the teachers. If your lesson is best taught using the parallel method, it may look like something on the right side of the slide. Teacher A would have one grade level, while teacher B would have another grade level. Each teacher would teach an ELA or math lesson at the same time, but based on that grade level standards. Are there better co-teaching models when it comes to using paraprofessionals? It is important to note that paraprofessionals are not co-teachers. However, they are there to support student learning and can absolutely participate in a co-teaching model. One teach, one assist and observe, and station teaching tend to work the best when using a paraprofessional. However, do not forget, the lesson dictates which model to use, not whether or not you are utilizing a paraprofessional. Based on administrator and teacher guidance, paraprofessionals will be assigned to facilitate small group instruction during synchronous learning, while the teacher retains responsibility for monitoring the instruction and supervision of the students in his or her charge. There are many ways you can utilize your paraprofessional. Here are a few. They can use the chat box to restate learning objectives, type in sentence starters and discussion stems, and clarify directions. They can gather data on student participation and send messages to students via the chat that may need more support. They can support students in work submission, provide links, and under the direction of the teacher, even support students in small groups. Well, we know this PD is packed with lots of information and we only have you for an hour. So this next section is full of online resources that you can use and refer back to when taking on this co-teaching endeavor. All of the resources that are going to be shared on the next few slides will be made available in the chat. We have created a document that contains live links to each site. Please don't try to click on the PowerPoint, as that will not take you anywhere. You must open the Word document that will be shared with you in a moment to access any of these wonderful resources. Here are two Padlets that are excellent when it comes to co-teaching. They both contain numerous links that are helpful in co-teaching. So we will give you those in just 1 second. Screencastify is a resource you can use to make learning more personalized. Please watch this 2-minute video that explains more.
Screencastify is a really simple way to record screencasts from right within your Chrome browser. Once you've installed our extension, click our icon and choose whether you want to record your browser tab, entire desktop, or just your webcam. Turn on your microphone if you want to narrate over your recording, and choose if you want to embed your webcam to add a personal touch. Once you're ready, click record and lights, camera, action. Spice up your screencast with our annotation tools. Spotlight on your mouse to direct your viewer's eye, or draw on your recording with our pen tool. Toggle your webcam on and off during your recording, and change the location, size, and shape of your webcam. Once you're finished, click our icon again and click the stop button. Your video will automatically save to your Google Drive. Then you can rename your recording, share it either by grabbing the Google Drive link or by publishing your video directly to YouTube. Premium subscribers can crop and trim their videos, as well as export them as an MP4 or animated GIF. Thanks for watching and enjoy creating awesome videos with Screencastify.
And I know that video and audio was choppy, at least on my end, so I'm so sorry if that's how that was, but we will make that video accessible to you in our Schoology group. On the next slide, there are some of the supplemental digital learning tools that LAUSD has made available to support digital core instruction. These applications are available through Schoology. Here are other links to some wonderful digital learning tools. Now remember, if you try to click on the PowerPoint, it's not going to take you anywhere, so it will be in the chat. Each one of these is on the Word document that was shared, so that you can explore them later, but I'll give you a quick description of each. Vocabulary is an online resource that offers short, engaging videos across a range of subject areas. This includes ELA, math, science, social studies, life skills, vocabulary, and current events. Hyperdocs. Hyperdocs are a great way to offer choice and to personalize your lessons to meet the needs of each member of your class. They are interactive documents you create by embedding links to additional material assignments and supports. You can also embed interactive games like Kahoot. Kahoot is a game show style interactive platform that allows students to answer questions and score points playing against each other. There are many settings to accommodate multiple populations, and they have links for distance learning specifics. Nearpod allows you to make every lesson interactive. This increases engagement and participation. Nearpod also allows you to monitor students in real time, so there is no guessing whether they understand the lesson or not. It also has built-in accessibility features like audio responses and Microsoft Immersive Reader. Choice boards. Choice boards are graphic organizers that allow students some autonomy in their learning. Students get to decide how they want to approach the lesson and how they would like to demonstrate or show what they know. You can build choices or options in lots of different ways. Jamboard is a Google product that we have access to. It works like a virtual whiteboard. You can pull images from a Google search, brainstorm, and share ideas from lessons, and even collaborate as a whole class. Jamboard makes learning visible and accessible to all. We are also sharing a list of articles that you can access for more information regarding co-teaching. Also on the document that we are going to share with you, you will find many quick links you can browse through later to help strengthen your co-teaching game. Here is our contact information. We are your special education support providers from LD East and South. However, we are only 3 from a fabulous team of 9. If you are from one of the other areas, please feel free to find your support provider on this chart and contact them with any questions you may have. Thank you for taking the time to attend today's PD Co-Teaching, Merging Traditional and Virtual Models. We really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to spend with us. In addition, a big thank you to Melissa Lugo, Joyce Radcliffe, and Guadalupe Perdoza Chung from LD East for putting together much of this content. Have a great rest of the day.